So the arc stuff right now is pretty much the best that it's been in years. Actually, not only the arc stuff, a lot of the roaming supers got a big boost with the roaming super changes, doing more damage, as well as being able to get the supers much faster. So today we have a build that uses the RAIDEN Flux that's all about getting super quickly, so we can just spam the RAIDEN Flux as much as we can. But we're also gonna be doing other things like constantly blind targets and also just constantly jolting enemies. And the only thing that you're gonna need for sure on this build is gonna be just the RAIDEN Flux. As long as you have the RAIDEN Flux, you're gonna be able to make this build work. We're gonna have a couple of different exotic weapons that you could possibly run with this build, but for sure the only thing you need is gonna be that RAIDEN Flux. But let's not waste any more time, let's get into it, and let's first start with our exotics. Now for our exotic, we of course are gonna have the RAIDEN Flux. Now the RAIDEN Flux is gonna do two things. It's gonna increase the damage that we do with our arc staff, as well as increase the duration of our arc staff. Whenever we do some hits, it increases damage, as well as slows down like the usage rate of the super. So whenever we actually have it stacked up to 3, our super drains very slowly. And as long as we keep doing hits, that buff just constantly keeps refreshing, meaning that we can just stay in the arc staff a lot longer. It feels like we could stay in the arc staff probably like twice or 2.5 times as long as we normally do. The RAIDEN Flux pretty much benefited from two different buffs that we got this act. The first one was the one to the roaming supers, where we can get them back faster, and they also do more damage to champions. And the other one was more direct, which is just increase the damage that we can get from the exotic. Instead of just getting 50% more damage, we get 70% more damage. And that leads us to be able to do some crazy things to bosses, as well as champions. As long as our champion is stunned, you pretty much are going to be able to like destroy it with 1 or 2 combos. And in case you guys don't know about like the art stuff combos, they're pretty simple. All you gotta do is do a light attack, and a heavy. And it kinda looks like this. And this is pretty much what you will always want to use against these bigger enemies. The final attack blinds as well as do some insane damage, especially when you have the exotic array stacked up. Now for our subclass, we are gonna be on Arc, since that's the only way that we can actually use Arc Staff. I wish we could actually have this on Prismatic. It would just be amazing, but that's unfortunately not the case. Now for our class ability, I actually recommend that you go with the Marksman Dodge, which is not something I do very often, but with this build specifically, where most of you is going to be at range until it's time to get up close with the super. For your melee, you do want to be on the disorienting blow, in case something gets a little bit too close, you can just hit it and blind it, as well as if it's a champion, you stun it. For your grenade, you want to be on the blinding grenade, it gives you a lot of utility, while still doing some pretty good damage, and also being able to stun champions. And since we are going to have the fragment that also lets the grenade jolt things, using this grenade by itself is going to be able to jolt both unstoppables and also overloads. So you're taking care of 2 champions, used with 1 grenade. Now for our first aspect, we're going to have the Ascension aspect, and this is going to give us a quick and easy way of just basically going amplified whenever we want. Being amplified is a big part of the build, and this just pretty much just guarantees that you're always amplified. And it also has the added benefit of jolting targets, so if you're in the middle of a bunch of enemies, you can very easily jolt them with this as well. And the second aspect is going to be flow state. No arc build is complete without flow state. It's basically just a staple. Whenever you defeat jolt targets, it makes you amplified, which is another way of becoming amplified, although most of the time you won't use it. But whenever we are amplified, which is going to be all the time, our dodge recharges more quickly, meaning that we can use it more often. And we also have damage resistance while in the dodge, just increasing our survivability. And even when we're not using our dodge to reload, we're also going to get that increased reload speed. So you could actually just rely on the reload speed if you want, and actually change your dodge to Gambler's dodge, so you want to use your melee a lot more. Now moving on to the fragments, we're going to have some pretty standard ones, but we start off with the Spark of Resistance, which is going to give us some damage resistance whenever we are surrounded. We're going to be mostly staying away from the enemies, but whenever we do get close to them, we definitely want that extra damage resistance. After that, we're going to have the Spark Beacons, and this is just the mod that we're going to have use. We're always going to be amplified, so this mod is always going to be on, so every kill with our special or a heavy weapon is going to be blinding targets. There is no cooldown in between actually activating Spark Beacons as well, so we can just constantly just reproc this over and over again, as long as we still have some heavy or special ammo. And because of the new mod, Arc Compounding, every single enemy that's blinded, it's also going to be taking some extra damage. So this is just like the perfect fragment this season, you know we gotta use this. After that, we're going to have the Spark of Shock, and this is what's going to let our grenade jolt targets. And lastly, the final fragment is going to be the Spark of Amplitude, and this is just to make a couple more orbs of power to help us get our abilities back, and also just to keep us alive, to get some healing from the orbs, and just add a bit of survivability to the build. Unfortunately, Arc doesn't have as much sustain as it usually does when you take away the combination blows, so we definitely need something to help us keep alive, to constantly regen, and with making more orbs, that's gonna be the way that we're gonna do it. Now let's talk about the weapons that you're gonna use in this build, and first we're gonna talk about the different exotics that I ended up liking with this, just so we can get the super vac faster. And the first one that I thought of, and actually ended up working pretty great, was the Outbreak Perfected. You can build so much super energy with this Outbreak on the Arc stuff now with the new changes. It is crazy. I'm gonna be playing in the background here so you can see just how much super energy we get from just shooting our pulse rifle. So you're gonna be able to build your super very quickly, especially on champions. But the only downside of it is that you definitely don't put out as much damage as maybe like a special for a heavy weapon. It is still some pretty great damage for a primary, but it is gonna take a little bit longer to kill those champions, especially if you're doing Grandmasters. Another really good one, and that works very well with this build, it's also the Thunderlord. Here we go again, Unknown talking about the Thunderlord, but it's just so good this season. Especially now here with this Arc Staff build, it works really well into our fragments, meaning that this thing is constantly gonna blind, it's gonna stun overloads, it's gonna stun unstoppables, it has the lightning strikes for extra damage, the catalyst makes it so it just auto reloads and just hitting lightning strikes, and it actually can surprisingly solo champions just by itself, as you can see in the background, and you get tons of energy from it. Maybe you don't get as much energy as something like the Outbreak, but you do get like about 55 to 60% of your super from just like shooting one champion. And this is something that you can easily do because of the amount of damage you actually have on the Thunderlord. Another one that I also tried was the Grand Overture, which definitely doesn't get you as much super energy as like the other two, but it will be better for just doing big damage. So if you don't mind getting a bit less super, but just a very consistent high damage weapon, then the Grand Overture is something that you may want to look into. And those are pretty much the weapons that I ended up using. If you go with the Thunderlord or with the Grand Overture, you definitely want to go with the Indebted Kindness, just so you can have another arc weapon that's special, that has a lot of ammo, and they can also proc that Sparky Beacons to use constantly blind a bunch of things. Now, if you don't go with one of the exotic machine guns, you want to go with a normal, just arc machine gun, and also of course the Outbreak is still keeping the Indebted Kindness, so you can still have that secondary that can also proc Sparky Beacons, but your heavy can also proc Sparky Beacons as well. So those are going to be the different weapons that I'm going to recommend, so you can get your super the fastest. Now for the artifact mods, the main ones you want to run are basically going to be Arc Compounding, Retinal Burn, as well as Trace Evidence. These are like the main three you want to like just keep in mind when playing with this. Trace Evidence will give you a ton of Ionic Traces, since we're going to be killing things that are jolted or blinded, and if you boost it whenever you pick up the Ionic Traces, you also get a bunch of armor charge. Retinal Burn will make it so your machine gun just basically blinds on like rapid precision hits, which also adds another way to blind and just basically make everything just a lot easier. And of course, Arc Compounding will make it so you deal extra arc damage to those blinded targets. And those are really like the only ones you gotta worry about. All the other mods are pretty much gonna be left up to you. So we're actually gonna be doing something different with the mods. We're actually gonna have two links this time in the comments below. One of them will link you to the Outbreak one with the Outbreak mods, and the other one will link you to the machine gun ones that have the mods for the machine guns. Just a couple of things change, mostly like finders and like siphons, and those are like the main things that are gonna change. So here we have Kinetic Siphon, or Harmonic Siphon, and also the Special Ammo Finder. This is the one for the Outbreak, that's why we also have Kinetic Siphon. On the machine gun ones, I think I just have double like arc. For the gauntlets, we are gonna have Firepower, plus Momentum Transfer, and Harmonic Loader, or Kinetic Loader, depending. For the chest piece, we're gonna have Concussed Dampener, Emergency Reinforcements, and Harmonic Resistance, used to help us stay alive. We're not really gonna be using our armor charge with anything but Emergency Reinforcements, so this thing is always just gonna proc. Now for the boots, we have the pretty standard stuff: Absolution, Orbs of Restoration, Recuperation, so we can heal with orbs and also get our abilities back faster. And lastly, for the class item, we're gonna have Powerful Attraction, Bomber, as well as Distribution, so we can again get our abilities back, and also collect orbs for just using a class ability. This thing doesn't matter, don't worry about that. I actually don't know why I have that on. That's just like some raid related stuff. But yeah, that's gonna be the mods. Like I said, click on the link that you want so you can get the set of mods that you want. And yeah, I'm rocking the Doki Doki set. I know some of you guys been hating on my drip, but you know, I doubled down on the pink with this set, and I think I'm looking pretty good. But with that, it's actually gonna be the end of the build. Now you guys pretty much have everything to go into any activity and just get a bunch of super, while at the same time just constantly blind a bunch of targets with your special and also your heavy weapon. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The one thing that you want to keep in mind with this build is that you always want to be amplified, so make sure that you hit your ascendants right as you're going into like the enemies, so you can get that amplified, and just from the first kill, you'll start blinding everything. After that, you can pretty much just use your dodge to constantly reload your weapons, proc Reaper to make more orbs, and stuff like that. As long as you keep killing things with your arc weapons, you should pretty much just be constantly amplified after amplifying yourself that first time. After that, you pretty much just use your Outbreak and your machine guns to get a bunch of super, proc your super as soon as you see it. Don't forget to use the arc staff combos against those big enemies, and just make sure that you get out before your super is over. Although most things will be dead or immune by the time your super runs out, especially if you're just popping the super specifically for them. But always be careful when your supers run out, make sure that you get back to a safe place. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the build, hopefully you guys like it. Thank you all for watching, thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care everyone, have a good rest of your day, peace.